this is Lisa Butterworth with the Mormon Sex Info podcast. Today, my guest is Tami Harris. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Tami is my colleague at Symmetry Solutions. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, Tami.
Well, I am new to the Symmetry Solutions family. I am a certified life coach, and I also am a licensed massage therapist and intuitive energy worker. As I did that, though, I realized that coaching is something that I was really fascinated with. I would find that clients would come in and we would start having discussions and different things would show up energetically through some of the body work that I was doing with them. And so I realized that maybe tapping into the coaching world a little bit would help assist continuous healing for people. So here I am.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about what coaching involves. Like what do coaches do?
You know, coaching is definitely a different world than therapy. So maybe people are asking, well, what does Tami do at Symmetry Solutions? Because most of my coworkers are therapists that work and deal with trauma with clients, and that is definitely not my scope of practice. My scope of practice is when people are at a place of mindfulness and self-awareness. I am more of a support and a guide to help give clients tools to assist them in really empowering and making change and transforming in their own lives. So I'm more like a support, giving tools and just different insight and perspective to their journey of self-improvement. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah, that sounds great. So I invited you here today to talk a little bit about divorce and sex.
Love it. Glad to be here because I have been divorced. I am a single after about 2 years. It will be 2 years in December when my divorce was final. I was married for 23 years. So that transformation was actually quite a painful transformation. Still going through the process. And then sex is definitely always a good topic to talk about.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, like, how do you see sex as being an overall part of your sort of wellness, since you're in the wellness profession and your energy work and your body work?
Well, you know, it's so interesting because I was born and raised in the LDS Church. I am no longer a practicing member. I resigned, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago. And how I grew up and what my perspective of it is so totally different than what it is now. I think sex is definitely a part of connection, obviously, right? Physical connection. But I think there is so much false beliefs or maybe limited beliefs that are so wrapped up and so connected with sex, and so much that people, especially in our my culture, the culture of the LDS Church, how I was raised, there's so much maybe misunderstanding. I think from my perspective and for me, I believe that it was enmeshed incorrectly into the spiritual and religious world when it doesn't need to be, that there's a disconnect there with, I don't know, does this make sense at all? Like the physical part, it's so important for us to be physically connected with our body, but I think in the religious world, we weren't felt safe to talk about it, to try and understand it. And in my world of wellness and understanding, I think that it's something that needs to be talked about more and not feared, not shamed, but to be looked at in a curious way. Just even in my own experience in the last 5 years of leaving the church, not being married anymore and not having shame wrapped around the fact that I'm not married and I am sexually active, and there's nothing wrong with that, that I am an adult that can make decisions, and just to be really mindful about how you make those decisions, right? Be wise, and realize that there are consequences. If I'm going out and having sex, there's probably going to be consequences that come from it, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, I like what you said about sort of feeling like it's okay to be curious and interested in your body in the sexual way, and that wasn't something that we were given a lot of opportunities to do when we were raised in the Mormon context. And that in order to, I think that there is sometimes a confusing correlation in our culture between the idea of the sacred and the secret, right? And
yes,
so often, like things that about our sexuality we didn't feel comfortable, we didn't feel like there was a context to talk about or to figure out, and it's really hard to do something in a healthy way if you're not allowed to ask questions about it, or yeah.
For sure. And especially for women, I think, you know what I mean? Like, one thing, I'm just going to lay it out there. I love sex, and not even looking at it as a physical thing, but I mean, obviously as a physical thing. Touch is one of my love languages, and sexual interaction is part of that. It's not all of it, but it's part of that. And what's so interesting is, as I started to become more curious about it, like, it almost is taboo for women to be able to say, you know what, I really enjoy the pleasure of sex.
Yeah.
Men can do it all the time. It's so great. Hey, bud, yeah, let's go, search and destroy or whatever.
Well, I think that the problem that they face, at least within Mormonism, and I don't think this is true, although I think it can be true in other religious traditions, but I don't think it's true more generally in our population, but that because they are expected to have pleasure in sex, and because they are expected to have that as a drive for them, that there is a way in which we shame them for that. That, like, oh, you're a monster, you're an animal, look at this.
Sure,
right?
Absolutely. But I think, like, culturally, in the whole sense of the word, I mean, even outside of religion,
Right.
women who are sexual or sensual, maybe there's more judgment from other women. I don't know. You know this better than me. You're definitely the expert here on this.
No,
but just in my own, but like in my own personal perspective, right? And also growing up in the culture and growing up in religion, in my experience, for me, I did like sex, but then I also could see how, for women, it's just part of a job, right? It's like, it's multiply and replenish the earth, have children, and then you're in this place of having children, and the last thing you want to do is connect sexually because it just feels like such a job sometimes. Right. When it's like, it doesn't, go in and just, I don't know, but you have to just be in the right state of mind. And there isn't a lot of conversation for women to be able to discuss, sex or what feels good to them, or let's just hurry and get it over and get done with it. I'm just exhausted kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that what I was raised with was this idea that I should be sexy, but not too sexy,
Right. Don't show your shoulders.
Right. But I definitely need to be appealing to men. And if I don't appeal to men, then I'm not worth anything.
Right.
But then our sexiness was rooted in how we were perceived by men and other women, but mostly men. And there was no sense of sexiness or sexuality being about our pleasure or the way we felt. Is that how you experienced it?
Yes, it was about pleasing it was about that looking for that outside, like, am I pleasing you? It's not about me.
Yeah.
Right.
Am I
It's
pleasing
the
you?
purpose of not about me. Right.
What do I want has nothing to do with it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think is that the mindset of maybe how as women in general we're, like,
Yeah, I think
it's all
so.
about, your job. Your job is to be, as a wife and a mother, is to provide, to make sure everybody's happy around you.
Right.
So if you go into the space of, oh, well, what about my pleasures? Oh, well, then that's selfish, right? so so it's like, okay, well, how can I pleasure you? Not even having the thought that, oh, this could be pleasurable for me, or I can enjoy it, or I can connect on this kind of level. I don't know. Does that?
Yeah. Was there a process that you had to go through in order to, like, was there a sense of like, if I enjoy sex, that would mean I'm bad? Did you have that sense,
You
or?
know what? Not really in my experience.
Yeah, I mean,
Here's
people do it, people experience it differently. I didn't get a lot of that either, but a lot of people do experience that. But
right.
go ahead,
In
yeah.
in my experience, what's so interesting? So I got married very young, got married at 19. Sex was a conversation that we could easily have in my home growing up. It wasn't really taboo to talk about. Although we didn't talk about physical, I mean, I grew up, my parents were divorced when I was young. I don't feel like I had a lot of support with women really talking about even like periods and what happens with that. And it was just kind of left to my own demise to figure it out by myself. And then again, growing up, living in Georgia when I was getting ready to get married, what was so funny in my experience was going to the gynecologist for that first initial exam. And I remember the nurse, asking me the questions before I had the exam. And she was like, so are you sexually active? I said, no, I've never had sex before. And she looked at me like I was lying to her. Like, oh yeah, girl, we'll just wait and see about that. And I was just like, no, I've never had sex before. And then couldn't actually even have the exam because I don't know how you say, I was
The
so
speculum wouldn't.
yes, I
Right.
was. So the nurse was like, "Oh, okay, she wasn't lying." And I remember the doctor saying, "Well, give it a month or so after you're married, and then come back to us, and we can actually give you an exam." It was such a painful process. And then I remember, of course, the
That
day
is
of the
the worst
honeymoon.
advice I've ever heard. Go on.
It was, but when you grow up, Utah prepares the girls for it because they're in a culture that most kids aren't having, like premarital sex, aren't experimenting with things. And I just remember my wedding day, we were excited, and my husband being so excited, to go spend some alone time together. And then that evening, even going to the honeymoon and not even being able to have sex on our honeymoon night. And I'm crying because it's so painful. And I don't know what he's thinking or feeling, but he shut down, and then I thought something was wrong with me. And you're not able to have those conversations, you know? And
Right.
so, and so that was the beginning of our sexual intimacy. And, I'm not saying it was ever bad. It was definitely great off and on, but for me, there was a need much more in our marriage for that. And it was funny, just in groups of friends, we would joke around often that, like, I was with the guys, it was like, yeah, husband already, has a headache or not feeling well, and I'm, joking around being with the boys, like, yeah, I totally understand how you feel with the wives turning you down all the time.
Yeah. It's
So
actually really more common than you would think because we have such a stereotype of it going the other way. But, like desire discrepancies are really common just because you have two individuals. Of course, they're going to have different amounts of desire for sex, right?
Right.
And the stereotype is definitely that it's the husband that wants it more. But I have a lot of couples where that's not the case, where it's reversed. So,
well, that's awesome. That's good to know,
yeah,
and now at this point, I really, it's not, I just realize that, and just through research and things that I'm learning, even in coaching, intimacy comes in such a myriad of different ways. And that's in my mind, and I think my experience just in my marriage, that's what I thought intimacy was, right? Was the sexual connection. And oftentimes we didn't connect there. So it didn't feel like there was a lot of intimacy in the relationship.
right.
And connection and not, and I think that was a big struggle. There were a lot of different ways that we didn't connect in our marriage. So my marriage was very difficult. I had a great experiences, but in general, it felt like a difficult through the years. But and then got to the point that it was like we couldn't connect on any level. So anyway, not to go into that too much, but unless we wanted to go there.
Let's go to the sort of like, tell me about the process of, like your sexual development as you went through the experience of divorce.
Well, it was so interesting. I think that my sexual development started after leaving the church initially, just because from my experience, I think that there was so much shame or guilt wrapped around sex because I was curious, but then I wanted to make sure I was this righteous woman, not doing things that my Heavenly Father would be disappointed in, So I was always very nervous to explore sex and explore different things, even using different kinds of toys in the bedroom. Or I always had this internal struggle with it. Like, am I doing something wrong? Am I doing something bad? And as I left the church, I felt like that even opened up a little bit. Like, to be quite honest, I don't even think I really did any self-pleasure masturbating until after that, just because I, started having friends that would talk about it more and made it seem so natural and so normal, which it is, but I never had that. It never felt natural and normal to me. So I was always kind of scared of it. And then it was even while I was still married, I experienced a little bit of it. I was curious and tried it, and I was like, oh, this isn't so scary. This isn't so bad. And even that actually started, I remember just even talking about it with my ex-husband, oh, this is what I did. It did ignite a little more connection, because I think I realized in my experience so much, I just wanted to do the right thing all the time. And so I was always afraid of curiosity. Like, I felt curious, but I was afraid of it. And I didn't want to do the wrong thing. I didn't want to do it the wrong way. And then, I'm sure my ex-husband was curious in his own way, but there was never communication between the two of us because we didn't really understand each other. We're able to communicate in a very healthy way. And so, just for me, my journey in realizing that sex is not shameful, that sexuality is not shameful, but that I could choose to look at it in a curious way and let go of this, now my belief system is, sex is a natural and beautiful, and it can absolutely still be a sacred thing, but it can be sacred through the curiosity and through the experimentation of bringing pleasure, to yourself and to the partner that you're with, without the shame or without, this outside authority, the church telling you how and what to do with it. And that's been very freeing for me. That was the biggest step to it, that it was like, you know what, I can be my own authority in my sexuality and my sexual curiosity and experimentation.
So for you, was like working through the shame or the guilt, was it a big process, or were you able to let go of it fairly easily? For some people, it can be a fairly easy process of like, oh, well, I don't think I agree with that anymore. But for some people, they really feel like that guilt continue or that shame continue to come up, even if they no longer agree with whatever is making, like creating this feelings.
Right. Oh, you know what? It was quite a process for me. I am definitely not a person who can just all of a sudden say, oh no, like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to experience, and whatever consequence comes from it. I am such an overthinker, or was more so. I'm doing better in that process of not overthinking things. I was honestly, like, I think my experience just towards the end of my divorce and a lot of the decisions some poor decisions that were made and the consequences that came from it made me like, I wanted so badly, I guess my whole life, I was just looking for outside validation to be, the good girl and doing the right thing all of the time. And, it's almost like the universe makes opportunities for you to maybe fall flat on your face and realize that you are still good and kind and thoughtful, even if some of your actions or your choices don't
line up with your values.
Don't line up with that. Absolutely. And yeah, I might be beating around the bush with this topic, but, and I'll just put it out there, towards the end of my marriage, I was unfaithful. There was both my spouse and I were unfaithful with each other. But I think we were both so starving to connect, and obviously in a space of not knowing how to connect with each other anymore, because we wanted such different things. And that was what's strange about it is it was an exciting time. It was a very confusing and complicated experience that I went through, because it felt very exciting. It felt very good, but then it was incredibly painful with the guilt and the shame and the secretiveness of it all. And then when everything came to a surface and everything was made known, the suffering that I had to watch people I loved so much go through made me realize how important I think, connection, communication are so integrated, like the things that we'll do when we're broken and we're hurting and we're lonely and disconnected, when maybe if there was an opportunity for me to go and talk to someone, like, for example, Lisa, just even you with your experience, and to be able to go and talk to someone and have someone say, these are valid feelings. These are valid, like, sexuality is a normal and natural thing, but let's do it in ways that are a little more healthy, right? Or talk through it or work through it in ways that are a little more healthy, I guess. Am I rambling? Does that make sense at all?
It makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I really like that framework. And I think that given the fact that, something close to half of people experience or like cheat at some point, which seems like a really high number, especially given how condemning we are as a culture towards people who, cheat in a relationship. Like, there's very few things that I feel like bring more judgment down, right? Like, we love to get in a big moral.
Well, you murder someone or you cheat. Like,
right.
It feels like oftentimes there is a comparison of taking a person's life with.
Right. And
with
very,
that.
very few people actually murder anybody. Like, that number's very low.
Right.
Right? And yet, like, here we have a behavior that a good half of us are participating in, and we don't seem to have a lot of tools as a society or as people for sort of like having productive conversations where we're learning from what's happened and not labeling half of all people as like really bad, evil, horrible people, but just saying, okay, well, what is it that, and this is the framework I liked that you did of like, okay, well, what are the things, like, what is the pain and the disconnection and the hurt that led me to this place of making these decisions that weren't in line with my values? And
right,
how can I make sure that in the future I have the tools and the connections I need in order to behave in ways that I feel aren't going to hurt the people I love?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess from my perspective, I don't see, I might get a lot of pushback for this, but I do not see what it works for some people, but I don't know if it's the truth for all the people. You'll have this information better than I do, but from my experience, this whole not exploring the sexual side of you at a younger age, maybe, this whole, well, if you want to have sex, well, you better get married, and you better make this choice right because this is your eternal salvation. Like, you only have one chance. You have one chance to choose someone. Maybe for some people that works great for them, but I guess in my experience, I realized that, like, to be able to connect sexually with people, and I'm not one that's like, I'm going to go out every night and do it, but it's different. You connect differently with people, even if it is the act of sex, but you gain different insights, you learn different things. And I think that's a valuable part of learning how you want to connect with, in healthy ways, with significant others. I think sex is just part of it, but it's not the whole thing. I mean, how can you know if you can connect with someone? I mean, that's a big part of having a healthy relationship with someone, is to know whether you connect with them sexually or not. Sometimes from my experience, you have this experience and then you're like, oh yeah, that's not a good connection.
Yeah.
It was really fun, good to meet you, but bye-bye.
Yeah. I do see the fallout of this in my practice, and I don't want to imply that like everybody needs to go out and have premarital sex in order to know that they want
me neither.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what I mean at all, but there, like, definitely the fact that we almost give no weight to it, right? Like, that I have many couples who didn't even consider whether they were sexually compatible when they got married. They may not have even kissed each other. And They got married for a lot of reasons that had nothing to do with their physical compatibility. And, obviously in my practice, only see the places where this didn't turn out well. I'm not going to be seeing the ones where this is working for them fine. But in my practice, that is a pretty common theme of like, well, we never had chemistry. And, my experience tells me that, like, if there were once sparks, usually, if we can get, some fires going, but if there were never any sparks at all, there's just nothing to build from.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you can be best friends. And I actually have had many couples where this is the case, where they're like actually best friends and they're just no physical chemistry. And it's really tragic. It's tragic because they love each other, they have families, and, and then they're faced with some really hard choices about, do I live the rest of my life without being able to experience satisfying sexuality? Or do I make some choices that are going to really possibly destabilize my family system? And those are tragic choices to be faced with.
I agree 100% with that. And, I think some people can do that. They're in a place that they can do that. And that's amazing. And two, if you can't, to be able to say, you know what, I did the best that I could,
Right.
And that the whole concept of that there's this one person out there to fill 100% of your needs, that's so much pressure to put on yourself and so much pressure to put on someone that you care about and love, but that's kind of, but that's kind of what we've been taught, right? That you're not even a complete person until you find this other person. And there's this other half of you. And I'm not even talking about this, I think just alone in the sexual phase of it. Because again, I just keep going back, the sex is just one piece of it. But it can, depending on the person, it can be a very big piece.
Yeah.
Right.
And I feel like there's another theme that's gone throughout, right? Like there's that theme of it's a lot of pressure to expect one person to fulfill all of your needs, all of them, sexual, emotional, financial, for the rest of your life.
Right.
But also there's this theme of that I think runs through Mormonism, especially, of like the fear of making a mistake, especially a sexual mistake, right? In any area, I think we're afraid of making mistakes because you should do it right the first time and we should all be perfect to begin with. And this idea of making mistakes as a way of learning and not judging ourselves as being bad or horrible or evil if we make mistakes. But man, you take that into the sexual realm and I feel like the intensity of it is times by 1,000, right? Like don't make any sexual mistakes. No.
Well, and then it takes away that, and just like what you said, this fear of not making a mistake is ingrained. I mean, think about it. Like, it's like you need to pick the correct husband and you need to make sure you have this all figured out at 18, 19, 21 years old. Like, don't mess up because you are you've made a covenant, like eternal, never ending. So it's no wonder people get so stuck in this fear of even making a decision, period, right? Because it's like, oh crap, what if I make the wrong one? And what happens? Like, can I not go back and can I not say, well, let's chalk that up, to experience, because there's so much heaviness put on, just so much intensity put on that. And I don't think it's happened. I think the intention around it is so good, because, but it can be so devastating and so toxic and detrimental to someone's well-being too, that it's like, hey, this is just an experience. What did you, instead of, oh, you're just a complete and total failure, being able to say, oh, well, I really made a poor choice. And let's look at why I made that choice. Let's look at, is there something that I can take from this and use down the road?
So what was that process like for you, going from sort of that voice of self-condemnation and perfectionism to the voice of sort of like, well, there's something to be learned from that?
Oh, geez. Gosh, it it took years, and I think I'm still even going through that, through the process, because my whole entire life, right, I wanted to be the best, do the best, be, you know, the good. And here I end up in a point in my life that I was also so incredibly lonely, living in the same house as a person who we were supposed to be connected and understanding of each other. And, you know, and I'm just desperate for outside validation, for someone outside of me to see me, and end up making this choice that is, I mean, was the very, you know, from everything that's taught in the church, even books that are read, you know, the scarlet letter, you know, being maybe perceived, and me perceiving myself as one of the most horrible human beings on the planet, right? And
Right.
where, how is my life even worth living? Or if it is, like, how much suffering do I need to go through in order to be forgiven for this horrible thing that I did?
And
that's
rough.
Yeah. And you know, it's been 3 years to I guess about 2.5, 3 years, and it's still like an ongoing process. When you hear side remarks of, you know, of people, they're like, oh my gosh, I would never do that in a million years. Can I tell you how many times that I said that as I judged other people? Maybe,
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not in a mean or cruel way, but it's like, how could someone ever do that? And and then when I would start hearing other people's stories of how, yes, they stepped out on their significant other, their spouse, I had an understanding and a deeper empathy for those that had made those decisions, because I knew what that felt like. You know, why did this person step out? Why did this person make that choice? And you're just in a place of just wanting to be seen, of wanting to be valued. What I realized in my journey these last few years was I was continuously and always looking for outside validation from other people. And if I continue to do that instead of working on that inside of me, that turning inward and doing my own self-work and coming to the point and realizing that, first of all, the only person that can truly make me happy is me. That if I could see my own value and what I had to give to the world, then I wouldn't get it into that space again. You know, that it was like, hey, if you don't see me and you see my value, then maybe we aren't good for each other. And maybe we need different things. And maybe, I mean, obviously we need different things, and we have different needs, and we have different wants, and that's okay. And not to take it personal. And that's where I've come to in my journey is, first of all, I had to own my half of the responsibility of what happened. I could have blamed my ex-husband that he wasn't giving me what I needed, that he wasn't providing for me in my emotional ways, that he wasn't there, all of these things. But what good is me blaming another person? How is that going to fix the problem? Right? And kind of having just a come to Jesus with myself, that it's like, do I want to be in that space of feeling like it's someone else's job to do that for me? Not really, because it makes me feel really powerless and out of control when I put that responsibility on other people, because I realized oftentimes I would be disappointed because it wasn't how I wanted it to be, right? So like I said, it's a continuous process, but that's where I really decided that I needed to go inward and take responsibility for, the disconnect that I caused. Now, I'm not going to belittle myself and criticize myself and judge myself, because I did the very best that I could. And my ex-husband did the very best that he could. We had beliefs that were taught to us, we had conditioning that was taught to us. And so in that realm of our truth at the time, we did the very best that we could. And that was one of the biggest places for me, and steps for me, was first of all to forgive myself and to acknowledge that I was doing the best that I could at that time. But can I do better? Absolutely. And
I think that that's a really, sorry, but I think that's a really hard balance to strike between sort of taking responsibility for yourself and seeing the ways in which you might have contributed to a problem, but doing it in a way that doesn't feel like a lot of self-condemnation, self-judgment, because that's going to be really sticky and get you kind of stuck in places that aren't healthy. But at the same time, like you want to take responsibility for yourself and learn and grow from things. And I think that like striking that balance, especially coming from a background or living in a world where your behaviors are going to be judged so harshly, that's a really tough balance to strike.
Well, what's so interesting is I started sharing my experience and what happened in me being unfaithful. I was so amazed. Like when I had the courage to share with certain people, I was so amazed at the compassion that they had for me. They had more compassion for me than I was having for myself. And that's the beginning process of it all, was each time I was brave enough to share this, well, this is what happened, this is what I did. It seemed that the people that I talked with had some of an understanding, obviously, because they were very kind and loving, and that helped me so much.
I love that.
That was one of the biggest things, is I started realizing that they're like, wow, like they have so much compassion and understanding for me. They are acknowledging, yeah, I mean, you made a pretty poor choice, but come on, I know that's not like the whole of a person that you are.
Right.
And so that was a huge thing for me. And another thing that I learned is, first of all, was I a victim? Yes, possibly, in different parts. My husband was obviously a victim, with different things. But there's a big difference for me, that I believe is acknowledging, yes, are you a victim in a situation or a perpetrator? Yes. I don't like that word. I don't know if there's a better word to use, but I
feel like perpetrator has like a criminal
yes, it sounds like a creepy, and that my intention was to destroy and hurt, and that's not at all what it was. But is there a better word? Do you have a good what do you think, Lisa? Is perpetrator the word? I don't know.
I don't think it's the right word. I mean, I think perpetrator definitely has like a
it's just yucky.
Yeah, it sounds like, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a word, but it's not coming to me right now, right? Like I made mistakes, but
right.
Here's the thing. I'm not a fan of labeling people anyway, like I don't think that we should call somebody bipolar. I mean, they have bipolar symptoms, right?
Yeah.
Symptoms of bipolar,
right?
And because anytime you label somebody something, I think that we shrink them into something, and you're just talking about that. Like we are much more than our worst moment. We are much more than like our symptoms. We are much more than, these acts. And so I think just in general, like when we turn verbs into nouns or adjectives into nouns, like labeling somebody and identifying them as a thing, then we're them into something that they are much more complex than that.
Oh, for sure. And here's another like bit of reality that I came to is, Tami, not everybody is going to like you. Not everybody's going to love you. And especially after this experience, I had to come to terms with the fact that I am hated or may be hated by certain individuals for the rest of my life or their life, right? And there's nothing that I can do about it. And that was kind of painful because I want everybody to like me.
Yeah.
Who doesn't, right? But then I realized the people that know me and that really, really know me know that is not who I am. That was a choice that I made. That was a poor decision, but that's not the essence of who I am as a person. And, as I talked with people and told them my story and I started feeling that, like, I don't know specifically how I was able to get that to somehow connect my mind and my heart to actually believe that. But luckily, I've been in that space that I could do that. And one thing also was acknowledging that, yes, I may have been a victim in certain areas, but I don't want to get stuck in the victim mentality. Does that make sense? Because if you're in that mindset of being a victim, then you'll never be able to make changes because it will always be someone else's fault. There will always be someone to blame. And I don't want to be in that powerless place.
Yeah.
Like, and so
I feel like it's a balance again. Because I mean, I think it can be, I think that often, like words like victim mentality are used by people who have a lot of privilege, and who are pointing at people who have been very victimized by things and saying, get over it, right? Like, there's definitely a tendency to use that. But, like, things often have some really deep truth in them. And absolutely, like, being able to see the areas where we can take power and use our power and set boundaries, that's really important. And I think that does have to be balanced out with an understanding that there are places where we don't have power and that sometimes we are victims of an unfair system and sometimes we can't do anything about that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so,
for sure.
Like being able to find a balance. And I feel like that is sometimes where like self-help books and wellness industry can go wrong, because it's all about like taking back your power and using your power and embodying your power and whatever. And that's great. And there are many places in this world.
That's my favorite word is and. Yep.
Right. And there are many places in this world where people don't have power, like if, like as a woman, I have less power than a lot of other people, but as a white woman, I have a lot more. As a person with, a certain economic ability and a college education, I have some power, like there's all these places where I actually do have power, but there are places where I don't. And the more access I have to power, I think the more it is on me to not see myself as a victim and to use that power, but also to see that there are really a lot of people who are very stuck in powerless places, and that is real, that the system has victimized them.
Absolutely. And I'm talking about in my own personal world.
Well, and I am too. I mean, I am too, in that like there are definitely places where you are disempowered by the system.
Absolutely.
Like you. And it's, I think of it as sort of like
but then that comes into the radical acceptance of it, right? Like, what can you do about it? Well, I can't do anything. So let's be flexible, or let's
rage against the system.
Yeah. Whatever you do, like, where do you want to put your energy? Do I want to fight up against something I really can't change, or do I want to put my time and attention into something that I can do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
yeah, well, I was thinking of the Serenity Prayer, the Alcoholics Anonymous, like see the things I can't change and the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Right. Well, and also, I mean, what is your definition of power? I especially in this culture and society that we live in now, there's some people that look at power as being above other people and forcing and manipulating them into doing things, that just to get what they want, that other person. Or is power, from my perspective, I see my power, but I also see, I see my power and my gift, and I see your power and your gift, Lisa, and I don't need to compete with you. We each have
Are you sure?
something to bring to the table. No, because I can't even compete with you. Like you, I can't even go there. But to acknowledge, that we all have something to bring to the table, and we don't need to compete with that or be jealous of it. That actually takes a lot of stress off of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, anytime we get into the kind of competing, comparison, hierarchy mindset, it can be very draining.
It's
and
exhausting.
Very pointless.
Ugh, so exhausting. Yeah.
So exhausting and pointless.
Yeah, for sure.
So I need to wrap up, and I would love to record another session with you. I would really be curious to sort of explore this. Okay, now we've kind of gotten to the point where we've talked about processing, like the infidelity and, working through a lot of your like issues that came up through, like your culture and your marriage and the assumptions. And then like, I'd really like to move forward with a conversation about, okay, well, what has it been like, like with these new mindsets and these new tools and these new, this new energy around your sexuality? Like, what does that look like? That's something a conversation I would love to continue to have.
I would love to talk about that too, for sure. So let's definitely plan on one of those. Well, and it's really fun because actually I'm going to be hosting or putting together. I have a workshop that I have put together that starts October 1st called Whatever, I'll Just Date Myself, which is important. Whatever, I'll Just Date Myself, which is the importance of either discovering or rediscovering yourself after divorce or
love it,
a long-term breakup. Yeah. So I'm taking a lot of things that I've learned and tools that have helped me in this, in this conversation that we had, and putting them into a 6-week workshop to share with other people who might be interested. So
if someone wanted to find that, where could they get more information?
So if they go to the Symmetry Solutions website, which is symmetrysouls.com, they can register on the website for the workshop. It's a 6-week workshop starting October 1st.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So, hopefully I can get some tools for people that are just looking for a little assistance in their journey out of,
couplehood.
Yeah.
Coupliness.
Yeah, I love that. I like the couplehood because of course I did it for divorce because that was my experience, but I think, we can all learn from it just as we're having to leave, relationships, and knowing that a lot of it's behavioral, that it comes from even just how we've attached as children to our primary caregivers. So there's lots to it, which is pretty intriguing and eye-opening. So
that sounds amazing. Thank you so much for being on Mormon Sex Info with me, Tami.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
We took the long road home, turned minutes into miles, and as the evening traveled on, the sunset bathed your smile. We stopped beneath the desert stars, wrapped in each other's arms. Was it simple as I love you. An ordinary, extraordinary truth.
It's been a long road here, a trail with tears, pain and sorrow too.
But through every storm we traveled on like lovers do. And if sometimes we fell apart, we always came back home. Was as simple as I love you. An ordinary, extraordinary truth. Some people say love is blind and forever is too long. But I see your eyes in every sunrise. Can't imagine life alone. Let's take the long road on together until we're gone. Want you by my side till the day I die and into the beyond. It's as simple as our love is. That's how I wanna go, all wrapped up in the arms of our extraordinary, it's nothing ordinary love. Ordinary, no, it's extraordinary.